Chapter number 4. The Food Question. Objections to paraffin oil as an atmosphere. Advantages of cheese as a traveling companion. A married woman deserts her home. Further provisions for getting upset. I pack. Cussedness of toothbrushes. George and Harris pack. Awful behavior of Montmorency. We retire to rest. Then we discussed the food question. George said, "Begin with breakfast." George is so practical. "Now, for breakfast, we shall want a frying pan." Harris said it was indigestible, but we merely urged him not to be an ass. And George went on. A teapot and a kettle, and the methylated spirit stove. "No oil," said George, with a significant look. And Harris and I agreed. We had taken up an oil stove once, but never again. It had been like living in an oil shop that week. It oozed. It never saw such a thing as paraffin oil is to ooze. We kept it in the nose of the boat, and from there it oozed down to the rudder, impregnating the whole boat and everything in it on its way. And it oozed over the river and saturated the scenery and spoiled the atmosphere. Sometimes a westerly, oily wind blew, and at other times an easterly, oily wind blew, and sometimes it blew a northerly, and sometimes it blew a northerly, and sometimes it blew a northerly, oily wind, and maybe a southerly, oily wind. But whether it came from the Arctic snows, or was raised in the waste of the desert sands, it came alike to us, laden with the fragrance of paraffin oil. And that oil oozed up and ruined the sunset. And as for the moonbeams, they positively reeked of paraffin. We tried to get away from it at Marlow. We left the boat by the bridge and took a walk through the town to escape it. But it followed us. The whole town was full of oil. We passed through the churchyard, and it seemed as if the people had been buried in oil. The high street stank of oil. We wondered how people could live in it. And we walked miles upon miles. But it was no use. The country was steeped in oil. At the end of the trip, we met together at midnight in a lonely field, under a blasted oak, and took an awful oath. We had been swearing for a whole week about the thing in an ordinary middle-class way. But this was a swell affair. An awful oath never to take paraffin oil with us in a boat again. Except, of course, in case of sickness. Therefore, in the present instance, we confined ourselves to methylated spirit. Even that is bad enough. You get methylated pie and methylated cake. But methylated spirit is more wholesome when taken into the system in large quantities than paraffin oil. For other breakfast things, George suggested eggs and bacon, which were easy to cook, cold meat, tea, bread and butter and jam. For lunch, he said, we could have biscuits, cold meat, bread, butter, jam, but no cheese. Cheese, like oil, makes too much of itself.